Hi everyone, it's Amy here from the blog I Think Therefore I Teach. Welcome to part 2 of 3.1 and 3.4 for Unit 4. So this is a combination video, so I am combining 3.1 with 3.4 as 3.1 is the explanation and description and 3.4 is the evaluation. So there is very little point me doing them separately, I might as well combine them. So part 1, which you will already find on YouTube, is for the police and for the CPS, and then this one is going to be on the remaining 3 areas. Right, let's get going. So, government sponsored, and we start here with the judiciary. Don't forget that you need to know different areas of each of these. You need to know the role and the funding, you need to know the philosophy and the working practices behind them. So as far as the role is concerned for the judiciary, all the judges in the land are known as the judiciary. There's over 3,000 of them. They are appointed, not elected. They swear an oath of allegiance to the crown, and the judicial oath do right to all manner of people after the laws and usage of this realm, without fear or favour, affection or ill will. There are superior judges, who are the high court judges and above, and inferior judges, the lower courts. As far as funding is concerned, the pay comes from the government. It ranges from $257,000 for more senior judges to $110,000 for the lower rank judges. The Senior Salaries Review Body, independent organisation, recommends their salary and advertises government on pay for public roles such as MPs. The salary sounds very high, but lawyers, especially in commercial law, can earn far more, up to $1 million. So it sounds an awful lot of money. For what they actually have to do, though, it's not really that high. In 2008, Dame Hazel Glenn conducted research which found many good lawyers are put off the judiciary because of the relatively low salary. I then got my students to do a quick match-up, so I got them to match up independence, impartiality, integrity, propriety, ensuring good quality and competence to the right answers. So if you want to have a go at doing this now, please just pause the video. If not, oh, I thought the answers were there. The answers must be on the other PowerPoint. So just give it a go. I'm just trying to see which ones I can give you as an example. So the idea of should be separate and free from government in their decision making will link to independence. Required knowledge and expertise would be competence. Non-biased to be impartial. Receive the same treatment, equality. I don't know which one I've missed off now. Upstanding and honest, integrity, moral standards and values, propriety. So there you go, there's the answers. The judiciary then are the courts, the Crown Court and the Appeals Court and the Supreme Court. The Crown Court, the role of the chairperson, they ensure correct procedures and fairness, they're compliant with human rights, they explain legal issues to the jury, summarise things and decide on sentencing if guilty verdict is needed, if the guilty verdict is decided. You did an awful lot of this in Unit 3 as well, so you can always get a few little synoptic areas from there. Court of Appeals and Supreme Court, they hear the cases from the lower court, make rulings and sometimes set precedents which will then apply to the lower courts. There are working practices then that you need to know, a very important role within society, ensuring the rule of law, maintaining justice and fairness. Their reach, some judges in higher courts deal with issues of national significance, whereas, sorry, excuse me, hay fever is bad today, whereas lower courts deal with more local issues. They are protected from being ousted, so politicians cannot abuse the system. To remove a judge is very difficult and involves petitioning the Queen and both Houses of Parliament, so House of Lords, House of Commons. They deal with all types of crime and offender except minor ones, which will be dealt with by the magistrates or the police, who just give a fine or something like that. So what is the evaluation then? The successes of the judiciary, the success of the judiciary, do not forget, as these stand, these are not evaluative points. You need to add in your own language, so a strength is, a weakness is, a success is, a weakness is, because, or you need to add in words like effective, convincing, reliable, valid, etc. But points to help you get started with that, they do have a lot of knowledge and expertise, they do ensure fairness and due process is followed, they use correct application of the law, fairness and consistency of sentencing, and they are independent of politics, so remain objective. Problems, however, the sentencing problems, claims of over-lenient sentences are increasing, so where they're given too lighter sentences for the crime, so they're not in proportion, proportionality, it's a good keyword to use. Letting criminals get away with less punishment than appropriate. 2016, 141 prison sentences were increased by unduly lenient sentences scheme, so up to 17% from 2015. So what that means is on the unduly lenient sentences scheme, who then look at sentences, they actually increased 17% more than previous years. 141 sentences were actually increased because they were lower than should have been given. 2017, 173 cases were referred and 137 were increased. That's a significant number in 2017. That's an awful lot of sentences that actually were increased. The scheme applies to the most serious offences: rape, murder, trafficking, child. So we're talking about serious offences here that are decreasing in time and length spent in prison. That's a really worrying thing, especially for public protection and the other areas of Unit 4 that you're studying. However, judges may not be too lenient, and this is not a high percentage compared with total number of sentences passed for such offences. Unduly severe sentences, such as the aftermath of the London riots 2011 as well. So sometimes the sentences were far too high, things like penal populism and zero tolerance and the moral panics link. So sometimes sentences are over lenient and sometimes they're over severe. There is also a bias because of who becomes a judge. 50% are over 50, 71% are males, 95% are white, 74 have had a private education, 74 went to Oxford or Cambridge. And so there are individual cases of judges showing lack of understanding of the impact of sexual assault on female victims. So because of their background, it can't help but infiltrate their own personal biases that they have. So this has been seen in sexual assault cases. But is this down to individual judges, or is there a clear pattern of bias? Can judges fully understand people from other backgrounds, so other backgrounds that aren't their own? We then move on to prisons, the aims and objectives of prisons and the funding of prisons. The aims and objectives of prisons, they are run by HM, Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, which again is a government agency. It aims to protect the public from harm, help offenders to rehabilitate and become positively contributing members of society, to also keep prisoners held securely and carry out the sentence of the courts. How does it get paid then? How do prisons fund? By taxpayers' money. Our money goes to fund prisons. In 2010 to 2018, funding fell, however, by 16%, our taxes didn't though, to $3 billion per year. This has caused a decline in the number of prison officers by 15%, and also many long-serving officers to leave. And I get my students to discuss why. So it could be because if you are near retirement, you then take early retirement, so you're part of the decline officers. Or if you're a long-serving officer, you then have to do your job as well as somebody else's because the number of prison officers is being cut, and you just think, nah, this is too much, this is too hard, or that your job then just feels unsafe because there's not enough of you within the prison, so therefore you leave. Consequently, a third of officers have less than 2 years experience. What impact that has, again, could link to your evaluation, is that when you have less training, so I'm not talking about training to get into the job, I'm talking about training as the experience that you have. How I taught after 2 years of teaching versus how I teach now after 14 years is very, very different. It's not because I wasn't a good teacher back then, but now I have experience. I can spot patterns and problems before they happen. I can think very proactively, which means I can see things before they happen. Whereas when you have very little experience, you see things retrospectively, as in bad things happen, and you then think, oh, I should have done that instead. But when you're talking about prisons here, for something bad to happen, for you then to learn, yeah, what bad thing has to happen though in the first place? So having 2 years experience is not good because you do not have past experience to make decisions with. The cost of keeping a person in prison in 2018 was £37,543. That's a lot of money to keep somebody in prison, a lot of money. That's a good salary for a year. An official study suggests taxpayers in England and Wales pay more towards prison upkeep than most people in Europe. Yet, as we know from other areas, recidivism is a huge problem in that people keep reoffending and going back into prison. This idea that prisons cost us an awful lot of money, $3 billion a year, that's been cut. Cost per prisoner is very, very high at $37,500, yet this is far more than what other areas pay. Why are we paying so much and it doesn't seem to be working? So it's maybe something to consider. Working practice, 122 prisons hold 82,000 prisoners. Most are run by the government. There are some private ones, such as G4S, Sodexo, Serco. HMP Birmingham was run by G4S, but returned to government control because of failures. There was a 2016 riot there. And the types of offenders and crimes, most serious crimes lead to prison sentences, but a large range of offenders are in prison from murder to theft. So most serious crimes and offences can range vastly from theft to murder. I then get my students to look into the reach of prisons, the local and national, so the types of prisons, if anyone's tried to escape, their activities, routines, incentives, privileges, rehabilitation within inside prison, etc. Evaluation then of prisons. The problems of prisons. So again, I'm not going into any successes. There are many successes of prisons that you can discuss, because obviously there must be strengths of prisons, because why otherwise would we still use them and put so much money into them? So the strengths are that it does keep people safe, it keeps people off the streets, it acts as a deterrence for others so that they don't commit crimes because they don't want to go to prison. The successes of prison as well, you have got opportunities to rehabilitate properly, etc. So there are many strengths, but straight into the problems here. First biggest problem is drug misuse. My students and I watched a documentary about the drug problems within prisons. I do recommend it. You can find it on YouTube quite easily. Long-term problem in prisons is drugs being smuggled in, but also a recent rise in NPS drugs, the new psychoactive substances such as spice. Artificially manufactured drugs have serious side effects, so aggression amongst inmates, psychosis, severe depression. 64 prison deaths between 2013 and 2016 were linked to NPS use, and difficulties engaging with rehabilitation programs. Prison staff shortages also mean that routine drug testing is not happening as it should be. And what that also means is that the checks for getting drugs in is not being as good. If the prison officers are not getting paid as much, then they could easily be bribed in order to just look the other way, etc. So drugs are a massive problem. You have a full gang network inside of prisons with drugs. Drugs coming in from the outside, drugs then being distributed within the system. And obviously this is a massive problem because it is leading to severe side effects for the inmates that add problems to the whole running of the system. And that's the link to the clip that we watched. There is also a lot of disorder and riots. Of course there is. If you've got less staff, you've got less people there, you've got less experienced staff, there are of course going to be more uprisings. They are more likely to happen when conditions are poor and there are staff shortages. So for example, in 2016, the HMP Birmingham was the worst riot in 25 years. That's what moved them from being a private to a government-run prison. Staff sprayed with water hoses, keys were stolen, cells were unlocked. I mean, that sounds frightening. When riots occur, the National Response Group is called in, Prison Riot Squad, but these incidents have increased. Further problems of prisons: overcrowding. Between 1993 and 2019, the number of inmates has nearly doubled from 43,000 to 83,000. That's an immense problem. Prisons have not grown in size. Prison funding has been reduced. Therefore, we've got nearly double the amount of inmates with less staff to look after them, with prisons that aren't getting bigger as far as the building and the services and the rehabilitation programmes. So these people are getting locked away, are not given any support, and we're doing anything about recidivism rates. These people, the number of inmates is doubled because people just constantly, even within a year, go back into prison. Why? There is fundamental problems here with the system. Deterioration of conditions, hard to maintain order, hard to rehabilitate, discontent grows, aggression and violence increases. Security, mostly good, only about 2 escapes per year from closed prisons, but security issues surrounding things being smuggled in is not as good. Safety, 2018 there were 8,400 attacks on staff. No wonder staff are leaving. Why have a job where you know that there's a high chance of you being attacked, and attacked by somebody that is dangerous? That's the whole reason they're in prison in the first place. 22,000 attacks on fellow prisoners and fellow inmates, so no wonder the staff are absolutely drawn thin. If not only are they protecting themselves from attacks, they're having to separate violence and attacks within the prison inmates themselves. 5 homicides, so 5 murders in prison. 47,000 incidences of self-harm. This is again doubled since over the previous 8 years. 69 suicides. And the Prison Officers Association has called for them to be armed with tasers and stab-proof vests due to the high rate of attacks. 19 per day. 19 per day. Who in their right mind would go to work in a prison? You get low pay, you have not got enough staff to be able to support you, you have a high risk of being attacked every day, and so therefore they're not getting people that are dedicated to the role or feel safe, so therefore these things are increasing. So these things are going to happen more and more if the prisoners think they're going to be able to get away with them, and obviously with less staff there's only so much one person can do with the amount of inmates they would have to look after. Rehabilitation and reoffending. There is strong evidence that rehabilitation is not working in UK prisons. Staff shortages due to funding cuts mean the right facilities for tackling mental health issues, addiction, illiteracy, lack of education are also missing. What this means is they leave prison with the same problems they had when they went in. They not only now have a criminal record, they still have no education, they still have addiction problems, they still have mental health issues. So no wonder the recidivism rates are so high. Short sentences exasperate this issue. Not enough time to rehabilitate offenders. As we know, a significant amount of people have a year or 6 months or less sentences. That's no time to be able to actually rehabilitate offenders. They're then given probation officers to watch them and monitor them. But what can a probation officer do? Recidivism rates, as I've been saying, within 12 months of 2017, 37.5% recidivism, which means that 37.5% of people reoffend and go back into prison. 64.1% of these have been given short sentences. That shows that short sentences do not work. They do not learn from it. They do not get the rehabilitation or what they need to be able to go and make a proper go at their lives outside of prison. So 64.1% of them return, and 40% of these are juvenile offenders, and probably will keep reoffending. I think there's a part on another PowerPoint that says I think that people reoffend at least 4 times, I think it was. So then I get my students to discuss and think about, do they think prisons actually work? Final section then is probation. This is what you do need to know for your 2022 exam. Probation, the philosophy of probation. Offenders can be reformed and made into positively contributing members of society because all humans have dignity and worth. Everybody deserves an opportunity and chance to succeed in life. There should be social justice, inclusion and equality. And there's 2 types of people on probation. This is what you need to know. This is really good stuff. Those given community sentences, such as hours of unpaid work, and those released from prison on licence before the end of their sentence. So again, that phrase is really good, released on prison on licence. So they're either probation because they watch people on community sentencing, community service, or they're people that watch people that are on licence. All offenders on probation are regarded as safe to be in the community. The NPS has about 25,000 people on its books at any time. It aims to protect the public by helping the offenders transform their lives. They challenge the causes of offending. They challenge the causes of why they offended in the first place, and they try and rehabilitate them to have better, more fulfilling lives back in society. To monitor high-risk offenders and to support victims of serious offenders. Once more, they are funded by taxation. They are funded by the taxes paid by us. However, again, the budget was 4.6 billion that was shared between prisons and probation. So that means that they got about 1.6 billion, because obviously we found out that I think it was 3 billion was prisons or something like that, give or take. There is much partnership working here, and that links to 1.2 of this area, or 1.3. There is much partnership between the courts, the police, private and voluntary organisations. There are 21 privately run community rehabilitation companies, CRCs, which work with lower risk offenders. The private CRCs are paid by the Ministry of Justice. In 2018, about 40% of offenders supervised by the MPS and 60% by the CRCs. But 19 out of 21 CRCs have missed their reoffending targets. So pretty much all of them have missed their reoffending targets. So basically, no matter what they do, the person still reoffends, and so they've missed their targets. In 2018, the government said that it would reorganise the probation service by ending all private contracts with CRCs and arrange 10 MPS regions to cover England, each with a division of MPS plus one CRC. So basically, they're just moving things around a bit so that people get the help and the support and the rehabilitation that they need. Their working practices then. The responsibilities include to assess prisoners before their release on licence to establish their probational needs, sort out accommodation if necessary, including if this needs to be supervised accommodation for a while, fulfil the order of the court, and to prioritise the well-being of any victims if the crime was violent or sexual, or if there was detention as a mental health patient. So what are, again, the strengths and weaknesses of the effectiveness of probation? If you get the word effectiveness in your question once more, please use it throughout your answer. Is effective, is not effective. The success is mixed. The CRCs tend to fail to meet their targets and government expectations. 12 out of 21 companies have failed, leading to 342 million extra having to be spent on improving the situation. Under the CRC control, housing needs were only met 54% of the time compared to 70% of the time under the MPS. In some cases, prisoners are released with nowhere to sleep. So successes, these probably won't really go down as successes. These are not successes, but you've still got some statistics, you've still got some ideas there, but these will probably not go down as successes. Further problems with probation. Often supervision was only done by phone under the CRCs. They spoke of using mentors, but only one prisoner out of a sample of 98 had experience of this. And as you know, with anything in life, through COVID, when you tried to get a doctor's appointment, you had a doctor's appointment via the phone. Phones do not work. You cannot supervise somebody properly via a phone. Face-to-face is all that works, but somebody can only be in one place at one time, whereas a phone, you can sit at home and make lots of calls, so you can see to a lot more people, but the actual care and attention given is not as good, is lacking. CRCs have failed to protect victims and children from abusers released from prison. They're not watching the prisoners well enough, the released people well enough, and that means that the victims of their crimes and the children that have been abused, etc., are again not protected. That's a huge problem. The CRCs tend to be short-staffed as they were trying to save money. This led to higher caseloads for officers. Higher caseloads means more people will leave as well. That if more people leave, that means that then the staff are going to be less trained because they're going to have to get new staff in all the time to train them up. Training up new staff also takes lots of time. So being short-staffed is a huge problem. At the end of 2019, Dame Glenys Stacey, head of the probation service, said that probation work should not be privatised and made into a commercial enterprise. It should always remain in the public domain. It's for us, so therefore it should be part of our domain. The MPS performs better than CRCs, but even so, it has critical shortage of probation officers, poor conditions, insecure premises, and a shortage of places on schemes. So this idea that the premises that people live in, the premises where all the main kind of paper, it's insecure. The shortage of places and schemes as in rehabilitation schemes, drug rehabilitation, educational schemes, etc. There's a shortage of these. Finally, charities and pressure groups that can link. These are usually exist to campaign and work for certain rights or welfare conditions of people of the CGS or affected by crime. They're independent of the government. They do not make a profit and are usually voluntary. Therefore, they can play an important role in challenging the system. Charities usually aim to help people and pressure groups usually aim to achieve change. Some organisations do both. And so what I get my students to do, so this is the final section of this area, so you do not need to know this, I don't think, for 2022's exam, but you do need to know it for future. I got my students to pick 2 of the following and investigate them. So I got them to do the aims, the funding, the working practices, the reach, types of offender, what they do and how effective they are. So I got my students to do the final section on their own as far as what they do and whether it is effective or not. So I get them to choose between the Howard League of Penal Reform, the National Association for the Care and Resettlement of Offenders, the Prison and Reform Trust, the Prince's Trust and Women in Prisons. Right, hopefully you found that useful. That is the final teach along with me or teach with me PowerPoint. So that is now all Unit 4, which you can get on YouTube. Please check out the playlists as well. Please give me a thumbs up if you found this useful. Good luck with your revision for your upcoming exams. Don't forget, any comments, please ask them below and I'll try and respond. And subscribe so you never miss out on any future videos. Thank you ever so much for watching, everyone. Bye for now.